Richard Downing, your economist, came in last time to discuss those numbers. Of course, he pointed out that nothing goes up in a straight line. We were looking for bits of consolidation in these numbers. So are you surprised that we have fallen back a little bit?
We are surprised because we did hope that this time round it would go up in a straight line, especially in anticipation of festive season activity. But that being said, there were a number of cautions in the previous index. The key caution was that the BCI was not finding consistent policy messages in the business environment that would sustain it in a positive trajectory. Now, since the BCI was released, or just shortly before it was released, there were such positive messages, but it was too late for the BCI to respond. There was substantial consistency between what is known about the growth plan and what was revealed in the medium-term budget policy statement. And these factors will definitely have a positive effect on the BCI if the policy consistency continues. But that will only be reflected later in the year because the BCI is somewhat backward-looking.
What specifically from the new growth plan and from the medium-term budget do you think is good for business and good for the BCI?
The first aspect that's important to the BCI is the consistency of the messages. The fact that government has a clear focus on jobs, that is going to be the uppermost objective, and that there are a number of other objectives and expenditure allocations that would support that. That is the key signal that the BCI is looking for. So within the business environment, we know what government's priorities are, and we know how to respond and how to position ourselves and how to strategize in relation to those priorities. That being said, there is still, from an organized business point of view, a substantial focus on social spending. We would have preferred, as always, a little more focus on spending to boost the economy. We believe that that is the sustainable way forward, that if we make a short-term sacrifice in terms of shifting towards boosting the economy more, we will then benefit in the long run in terms of taking care of those social commitments that we have.
Of course, we've had very few details about that new growth plan coming out, probably more coming out ahead of the budget in February. Would you expect more details that would look at boosting the economy?
There must be more details. That was the key criticism of what is known so far, that from a strategic high-level point of view, it all sounds good and it all sounds very palatable to business and other stakeholders, but the devil is in the detail, and we look forward to engaging with government on those details. Those are very ambitious targets, some very ambitious plans and strategies and focus areas that have been highlighted in the growth plan, and we're not really certain how government plans to achieve those objectives. We're optimistic that they have done proper research into how that can be achieved and have come up with great plans, but we do need to hear the details, and we do need to hear about how we can support government towards this end, towards achieving those objectives in terms of job creation. Government can definitely not do it on its own, and that was a key theme in our annual convention, which we held a few weeks ago, that in respect of all of the challenges that South Africa faces, poverty, crime, job creation, a partnership approach is required. Different partnerships for different things, but it's the only way in which we can deal with these challenges, because no single stakeholder in the economy can be all things to all people. But you have a better chance of achieving that if you have sound and strategic partnerships.
We've also had consistency of message really on the rand at this stage, and we can see from the BCI that the rand does affect manufacturing. We see manufacturing negative between September and October. So we had the new growth plan. We had Praveen Gordhan with the medium-term budget policy statement. We've had the Reserve Bank also all talking about the strength of the rand. Do you think they have the willpower and the ammunition to try and weaken the rand from these levels?
I don't believe that they could make a substantial difference in terms of the strength of the rand. The global forces are too strong for an economy as small as ours to challenge those forces. I think the best that we can do as a nation is to focus on the domestic issues that we face, productivity challenges, strengthen our organizations, create the correct policy frameworks, both to attract investment and to attract foreign interest, as well as to become a more competitive nation in those global markets. I believe there's often too much emphasis on the strength of the exchange rate. I'm not denying that it is harming business and it does have employment consequences, but it's often used as a scapegoat. There are a number of areas where we can make a difference, where we can make changes internally or domestically. So I would rather that we spread our attention evenly to all those challenges rather than diverting too much attention to one issue, which sometimes tends to be a scapegoat.
How about measures like relaxing exchange controls? How does that affect your constituents?
I think that the messages and signals sent from the MTBPS in that regard were very positive. It's not so much about the actual relaxation, it's more about the signals that are sent. The strong message is sent that we want to attract foreign companies to have their headquarters here or retain domestic headquarters in South Africa. That was a very good message. The message that we want to encourage outward investment and participation in global markets was a very good message. We know there will not be a big bang in terms of exchange control, but I think that we're on the path to a very large leap forward in terms of the relaxation of exchange controls. That's what we believe emerged from the MTBPS.
Of course, we also had the Minister talking about more accommodative monetary policy, and it does look increasingly likely that we could have another interest rate cut. Do you think that's going to help provide the boost we need to our economy? Would that be welcomed by your members?
Interest rate cut is always welcomed, especially when many of our firms are still carrying huge burdens out of the crisis. Many consumers are still carrying huge burdens out of the crisis. There's also, once again, the impact in terms the psychological or sentiment impact that government wants to encourage activity, or monetary policy wants to encourage activity, both to consumers and business. That's a very reassuring signal on both sides. So it's the debt burden alleviation, the sentiment impact, both those I think will have a stronger impetus towards generating greater economic activity than the actual cut itself. The real benefits of that are not usually substantial, especially if it's, as we expect, 50 basis points at most. The greater impact is in terms of the signals that we're sending to our markets. But of course, one has to remember that we're now entering the area of historic lows in terms of interest rate, and the Reserve Bank will be cautious because there are sometimes unintended consequences when one goes into an unknown area.